Notre Dame had been pretty quiet on the transfer portal front during the run in the college football playoff, but over the weekend, Marcus Freeman and his staff added 4 key players for next season, including the most important addition of the class. This is Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and I am thrilled to have you here on Tuesday, January 14th. And thanks for making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right. We interrupt our coverage of the national championship game against Ohio State to give you some not-so-breaking news. Notre Dame officially added 4 new players in the transfer portal over this past weekend, including 2 defensive tackles, 1 safety, and the increasingly valuable place kicker. All in all, the Irish have added 8 new players to next season's roster in this transfer portal cycle, and what they lack in quantity, they make up for in quality. So today, I'm going to break down each new addition and what they bring to the table. Then at the end, we will evaluate the group as a whole and answer, is Notre Dame done in the transfer portal this offseason? Now, if you are confused by the timing of this news, because Notre Dame is going to play in the national championship game a little under a week from now, and you're wondering, why are we talking about this now? I get it, but it's actually pretty simple. The college football calendar is extremely flawed, and the transfer portal window happens at the same time as the college football playoff. And the Notre Dame support staff has been working behind the scenes, recruiting these guys during the playoff run, and they waited until basically the last possible second to officially announce the rest of the new additions to keep the focus on the playoffs. I get it. You want to keep the main thing, but considering Notre Dame students started classes yesterday for the spring semester, it didn't really make sense to wait any longer because these guys were already enrolled in the school and they started taking classes. Tomorrow, we're going to get back to talking about the national championship game, but I did want to spend some time on these transfers because I think the staff did a terrific job with this group, all things considered. So the first guy I want to talk about, former Louisville defensive tackle Jared Dawson. I believe he is the most important addition in this class. He might not end up being the best. He might not end up being the most productive, but he's the most important addition because he plays the position of biggest need for Notre Dame in this transfer portal cycle, and he is the best of what Notre Dame has brought in at that position. Not only is it a huge position of need for Notre Dame because of what they're losing, right? They lose Howard Cross, they lose Riley Mills, they lost Jason Onye, but defensive tackle is just one of the most important positions on the football field. Championships are won on the line of scrimmage, and Notre Dame is going to have one of the best offensive lines in the entire country next year. They need a championship-level defensive line to go along with that. When Notre Dame lost Riley Mills for the remainder of the college football playoff, a lot of people just assumed that would be enough for them to lose to Georgia because their defensive line at full health was considered better than Notre Dame's. Credit to Notre Dame's defensive line for stepping up in a big way, but we saw in that first half against Penn State when the defensive line was getting gashed how easy it was for Penn State to move the ball. Credit to Al Golden for making those halftime adjustments and figuring things out, but Notre Dame can never be in a position like they're in now where their depth is just decimated at the most important time. They've been able to put it together, but you don't want to go into a season with depth concerns, right? Because you're probably going to have to address them at some point due to injuries. Hopefully not as many as what Notre Dame is dealing with right now, but it was very important to reload at that position to make up for some misses on the recruiting trail. They need a guy who can come in and at least compete to start right away because I like Donovan Heinisch, I like Gabriel Rubio, and some of the guys behind him might end up being pretty good players, but they need someone to come in right away, and I think Jared Dawson is going to do that. Not only that, he's old. He's going to be entering his 6th year of eligibility after playing his first 5 seasons with the Louisville Cardinals, and he's a big body, 6'2", 305 pounds, and he's a late bloomer. 2024 was a breakout season for him. He had a career high in tackles with 19, sacks with 4, and tackles for loss with 6.5. He also had 12 quarterback pressures and 15 stops at the line of scrimmage, according to Pro Football Focus, and he's really been a consistent player since the 2022 season. For his career, he has 51 total tackles, 9 sacks, and 2 fumbles forced. But whenever you're looking at a defensive tackle, the stats rarely tell the whole story unless they're just absurd. If the defensive tackle is racking up a ton of numbers, then yeah, that guy's a stud, right? Because defensive tackle, a lot of the responsibilities of the job is like eating blocks and then just kind of making room for the linebackers to come in there and actually make the tackle that registers a stat. So I reached out to a good friend of the program, Mike Rutherford, the manager of CardChronicle.com. I had him on before Notre Dame played Louisville this past season and the season prior to that. He's great, one of my favorite media personalities in my hometown of Louisville. I just asked him, what are your thoughts on Jared Dawson? And this is what he had to say. Quote, Dawson is super, super talented, really came on as the season went along and was dominant at times. Very sad to see him go, end quote. That's about as high a praise as it can get for a defensive tackle in the transfer portal. So I was already pretty high on him. Then I heard that from Mike Rutherford, a guy who I trust. He would not lie to me about something like that. And now I'm even more confident that he's going to be a really good player for Notre Dame. He also played really well against Notre Dame this past season. He finished with 4 tackles in that game and was the second highest graded defensive player for Louisville on Pro Football Focus in that game. I also think that there's a chance that Joe Rudolph, the Notre Dame offensive line coach, went to Al Washington and Al Golden said, hey, that guy was a problem for our offensive line. You should look at him. And maybe that's what led to Notre Dame picking him up in the transfer portal. But he is a grown man playing a position where you need grown men. And Notre Dame is very thin at defensive tackle next year. They've got Dawson now, which is great. And they got Gabriel Rubio, who's going to be in his last year of eligibility. They also have Donovan Heinisch, Armel Mukum, and Sean Civillano. I don't really have high expectations for Devin Houston or Brennan Vernon at this point in time. Maybe they end up proving me wrong, but I just don't really see them as big-time contributors at Notre Dame. I think they're probably going to transfer out at some point, or they're just going to be career backups. But either way, I'm really happy that they were able to add a guy like Dawson because I really like what I've seen from Gabriel Rubio and Donovan Heinisch as they've had to come in and play an increased role during the college football playoff. But they really need Dawson to be a hit because, as we've seen from this Notre Dame defense all year long, they really want to rotate guys on that defensive line throughout the course of the regular season. And as Notre Dame continues to play in this college football playoff, the season just gets longer and longer. So you need to keep guys fresh during the regular season. And by adding Dawson, I think they're going to be able to do that at defensive tackle. But Dawson was not the only defensive tackle they added over the weekend. They also added former USC D lineman Elijah Hughes, and I believe he provides much needed depth at the position, even though I don't think he's going to compete to start in his first season. The good thing with Hughes is he has 2 years of eligibility remaining, so he's an undergraduate transfer, and he was a reserve player for the Trojans this past 2 seasons. He actually played in 8 games as a true freshman, mostly because USC did not have anyone else on that defensive line. His freshman season, that was the year where Alex Grinch was still there, and this was a historically bad USC defense. But hey, credit to Elijah Hughes. He came in and made some plays as a true freshman. Over the course of his first 2 seasons with the Trojans, he finished with 12 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and 1.5 sacks. He's a little bit taller than Dawson. He's 6'3", but a little bit smaller in weight, 290 pounds, and he is projected to play the 3 technique at Notre Dame, which makes sense given his size and his explosiveness. But like I said, I don't really expect him to compete for a starting job, but I absolutely expect him to be in the rotation next year. He's an important depth piece behind the guys I mentioned, like Dawson, Rubio, and Heinisch. We'll see what ends up happening with Armel Mukum and what he can do for the team next year. It seems like going into the season, there was some momentum building for him to be a factor. Then it didn't really work out that way, but it kind of reminds me of Jason Onye going into last season, where in the offseason there was a lot of hype. It didn't really work out for him at the beginning, but then the following season, he was much more of a contributor before he left the team. Now, Hughes is a little bit under the radar. He was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, but he's a low-risk, high-reward type of addition because there's already some other guys at that position that can compete. He doesn't need to come in and start right away. It's not as more pressure practice like a player like Dawson, but it's also fun to get one on your rival, USC, right? There's a whole lot of problems going on with the USC Trojans. They're losing guys left and right, and if Notre Dame sees something in Elijah Hughes and he ends up being a player at Notre Dame, hell yeah, that makes it even better, right? That we poached one from the rival. So we'll see how he ends up playing at Notre Dame, how he ends up contributing, especially early on. But I said Notre Dame needed to get at least 2 defensive tackles in this transfer portal cycle, and that's exactly what they did. I still think they need at least 1 more. I would have preferred 2 starters, but instead they got 1 likely starter and a quality rotation player as well. It's not perfect, but when you consider just how hard it is to acquire that level of talent at this position in the cycle, it's certainly a step in the right direction for Notre Dame. Staying on that defense, Notre Dame bolstered their secondary by adding an NFL-caliber safety from Virginia Tech in safety Jaylen Strowman. Why he could be a huge boost to the back end of the defense alongside Adon Schuler, coming up next. Today's episode is presented by Game Time. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff games is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of being at the first-round game against Indiana, and I cannot wait to make more new memories at the national championship. And Game Time has exclusive zone deals on great seats for the college football championship game. These exclusive zone deals are specially selected selections of the stadium. 1, mezzanine end zone. 2, mezzanine corner. 3, upper midfield, where fans with flexibility can find deeper discounts by letting Game Time choose their exact seats for the game. Game Time also has a new feature called the Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can see the view from your seat before buying, and the app shows the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So if you are still in the market for tickets to the national championship game between Notre Dame and Ohio State, Game Time is the perfect place for you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Notre Dame added their second defensive back in this transfer portal cycle, and I'm prepared to say he's going to be a stud. You know why? Because Notre Dame defensive back coach Mike Mickens evaluated him, and it's to the point now where Mickens has proven to be such a great evaluator of talent that if he likes someone at the position, then I am convinced they are going to be great. This is the same guy who recruited Benjamin Morrison, Christian Gray, and Leonard Moore out of high school. They played early on in their careers, and they have been great additions for Notre Dame. This is also the guy who went out and found Thomas Harper in the transfer portal, and Jordan Clark, and even Rod Hurd, 3 guys who have been crucial to the Irish these past 2 seasons. They've already added Devontae Smith from Alabama to play nickel, and I think Jaylen Strowman has a great chance to start right away next year opposite Adon Schuler at safety. So Strowman is a grad transfer, and this is going to be his last year playing college football, but going into this past season, most people projected 2024 would be his last season playing college football because he was projected as high as a day 2 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. But he suffered a shoulder injury in the season opener against Vanderbilt and then ended up missing the remainder of the season. Really tough break for him, but now he gets one more chance to prove himself at the college level, and he's going to do that with Notre Dame instead of Virginia Tech. He had surgery already, but his health is going to be something to monitor all year long. We know that shoulder injuries have just have a knack of coming up again, and it's just an unfortunate thing. But also, when Notre Dame added Thomas Harper, there was an injury history there, but fortunately for Notre Dame, he was able to play, I think, in 10 out of the 12 regular season games, or maybe it was 11. I know he missed the Louisville game that year, but Notre Dame had pretty good injury luck with him. They have not had any good injury luck this past season as a whole, but let's hope that Jaylen Strowman is healthy for a full season because I think he is a very, very good player. When he's out on the field, he has been extremely productive. He was a regular contributor for the Hokies since his sophomore year back in 2022, but his best season was in 2023. He finished that year with 55 total tackles, 2 passes deflected, and 15 stops, according to Pro Football Focus. And for his career, he has played in 36 games. In those 36 games, he's racked up a total of 112 tackles, 5 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. His best attributes might be his experience and versatility. When you look at Notre Dame's safety room next year, they're going to lose Xavier Watts and they're going to lose Rod Hurd because they're both going to exhaust their eligibility, and I think Xavier Watts is going to be drafted in the NFL. So experience is going to be at a minimum for the safeties next year because Adon Schuler is going to have 1 full season as the starter, but that's pretty much it for that room. I mean, you got guys like Luke Tauch, who I like. He's up next, but he hasn't really played that much at safety. He's been more of a factor on special teams, although he did have a pick 6 on defense going up against Florida State, although I think maybe you or I could have had a pick 6 going up against that Florida State team. Either way, don't want to diminish Luke Tauch because I think he's a really good player, but he just has no experience really playing in this defense. And then you've got other young guys like Ben Minnick, Kennedy Urlacher, Tay Johnson, Tabron Benny Powell, guys who have some potential, but they just really haven't played for Notre Dame on Saturdays yet. And experience is important at every position, but specifically safety in an Al Golden defense, because you are asked to do a lot pre-snap, and then as the play progresses, you have to diagnose everything that's going on in front of you. And we know Notre Dame runs a very complex defense, so it's difficult to put a safety out there who doesn't really have a ton of experience. So it's great that Notre Dame has Schuler for next year, but they want a little bit more, and that's a big reason why they went out and got Jaylen Strowman. But his versatility is also a factor here. He played all over the field for the Hokies. In 2023, he played the majority of his snaps, 138 at free safety. But he also played 128 in the box and 112 at nickel, according to Pro Football Focus. And we know versatility is huge in Al Golden's defense, so Strowman is going to make for a great chess piece for that defense next year. I think he's like a better version of Rod Hurd, because Rod Hurd had played all over the field when he was with Northwestern. And even though he brought a ton of experience, I don't think he had the same level of raw talent that a guy like Strowman has. Like, football runs in this guy's family. His older brother, Greg, was an all-conference corner when he was at Virginia Tech and was also a great return guy. Jaylen was a little bit higher-rated recruit, but he hasn't quite lived up to those expectations just yet. He probably would have if he had played this past season, but he has a great chance to really reach that level when he's at Notre Dame. His biggest issues are staying on the field and missed tackles. Not only did he miss last season due to injury, he's also been called for multiple targeting calls in his career, so he's going to have to clean that up once he's with Notre Dame. And he also missed 10 tackles for the Hokies in 2023. For the sake of comparison, 10 missed tackles would be third on the team right now for Notre Dame, but it's also important to put out that it's a little bit harder for safeties because they're put in some pretty, tough situations trying to make plays in the open field, and that's why Adon Schuler and Xavier Watts are currently 1 and 2 on the team in missed tackles. So I'm not really worried about that. We know that Notre Dame's defensive backs tackle at a really, really high level. I think once he's with the team and with Mike Mickens, he's going to get much better at tackling. That's not going to be an issue for him when he's with the Irish. He can certainly improve in that respect. But the most important thing is he's got NFL ability, and he flies around the football, which is perfect for this defense. If he can stay healthy, I think he could be a big-time player on the defense next year. Another player who has the chance to be a big-time acquisition is Noah Burnett, the former kicker from North Carolina. For the 4th consecutive year, Notre Dame has picked up a graduate transfer kicker, and I think you can count on that happening for every single year, so long as Marcus Freeman is the head coach. And I get it, right? You want a guy who's already kicked in some major college football games, and you trust him a little bit more in tense situations. Like in the season opener against Texas A&M, when Mitch Jeter came out there, you weren't concerned about how he'd fare in that moment because he had already proven at South Carolina that he could kick in big-time SEC stadiums. So Notre Dame is not going into the SEC well for this kicker. They're going into the ACC, but this was a quality addition for Notre Dame. Now, Burnett doesn't have quite the same credentials that Jeter did when he transferred over to Notre Dame, but he's very experienced. He's been the starting kicker for North Carolina since 2022. He has attempted 62 field goals in his career, and he makes them at a 79% clip. His strength has improved as he's gotten older. Prior to 2024, his long was 48, but this past year, he went 2 of 4 from 50+, including a long of 52 yards. So that's good. You know that he can kick it from way out, and he was nails in 2023. He finished that season 19 of 20 with a long of 48, and he did not miss an extra point. But this past season, he was not quite as accurate. He finished 15 of 21, which is about 71%. But he did miss 4 from under 50 yards. That's the part that's a little bit concerning for me. And oddly enough, he was actually better from 40 through 49 than he was from 30 through 39. Like, that intermediate range gave him some trouble. He was 12 of 18 in the intermediate range. And I think it's fair to be concerned about the dip in accuracy, but he's very experienced, and he's not going to be afraid of the moment. And you could also just look at his season in 2023 and say, okay, you've clearly got it in you. You can be a consistent kicker at the college level, and you've already proven that. So now it's going to be on Marty Biaggi to kind of get that version of him back in 2025. We know how valuable a kicker is, especially as of late, right? Like, Notre Dame is not playing in the national championship if not for Mitch Jeter. It was not always great with Mitch Jeter. Like, once he got hurt in the middle of the year, it was not a whole lot of fun when Notre Dame ran out there to kick field goals. But once Jeter got healthy and he gained his confidence back, he has been nails for Notre Dame, and he's had to come through in these big-time games late in the year. He was great against IU, despite the fact that one got blocked. Nails against Georgia, nails against Penn State, including the game winner that sent Notre Dame to the national championship. Those are the goals. Those are the expectations for Burnett in his one and only year with Notre Dame. Is he going to live up to them? We're going to have to wait and see. But the good thing is, if he struggles at any point in the year and he goes through a really down stretch, at least Notre Dame is going to have another scholarship kicker on the roster in true freshman Eric Schmidt. But I don't think Notre Dame is going to have to turn to Schmidt. I think they really like what they saw in Burnett, and he's going to be a very valuable piece to the team next season. Now that the winter cycle has come to a close, let's take a look at the 8 new additions as a whole. Are they enough to fill the needs on the roster? And are the Irish done in the portal this offseason? That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is also brought to you by WayFair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm currently looking for furniture, and their huge selection makes it easy to find pieces that fit my style and fit my budget. My favorite part, the free and hassle-free delivery, even for the larger items. WayFair's site was so easy to navigate, and I found everything I needed in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. WayFair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. Give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. WayFair. Every style, every home. Now that Notre Dame has already added 8 players in the transfer portal this cycle, and the fact that classes started this past week for the spring semester at Notre Dame, I think they are done in this cycle, but I do expect them to be active again in the spring window following the conclusion of spring practice. So in addition to the 4 guys we already talked about on today's show, Notre Dame also added former Virginia wide receiver Malachi Fields, former Wisconsin wide receiver Will Pauling, Alabama defensive back Devontae Smith, and Arkansas tight end Ty Washington. Overall, I think this is a really good class that fills almost all of the needs I felt they had, but there is still some work to be done in the spring window. Let's revisit what I consider the biggest needs for Notre Dame in the transfer portal going into the offseason. So the number one priority was getting at least 2 to 3 defensive tackles. I thought they needed 2 starters and at least 1 depth piece. They're about 2/3 of the way there, right? I expect Jared Dawson to be a starter next year, or at least play starter reps, even if he's not the first guy out there on the field. And I think Elijah Hughes was a good piece to add to the rotation. But I still think they need another starter caliber player at defensive tackle. But still, getting 2 guys this cycle is a step in the right direction. The second biggest need, in my opinion, was wide receiver. I thought they needed 2. It wasn't like they needed as many guys as they got last offseason when they got Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison, and Bo Collins. I felt like this year, quality should prioritize quantity, and I feel like they got 2 really quality players. Malachi Fields was really productive at Virginia these past 2 seasons, over 800 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns in each of the past 2 years. He also is a big body who can make contested catches on the boundary. Big addition there. Will Pauling is a very true slot receiver in every sense of the word. He's there to catch the ball in short yardage situations, move the chains. His average yards per completion is less than 10 yards. And you know what? That's fine. Sometimes you need a guy like that, especially in a Mike Denbrock style offense. So they already got 2 wide receivers there. I think you can check that box. They are done at wide receiver unless more guys who are currently on the roster end up leaving, but they'll cross that bridge when they get there. For now, I think they're done at wide receiver. The number 3 biggest priority I had was nickel. That was done early. Devontae Smith, the Alabama transfer, satisfied that need right away. He was the first player to announce his intention to transfer to Notre Dame, and Alabama fans were upset that he left. He was a starter for the Crimson Tide last year, a productive player on that defense. So for Notre Dame to go into the SEC and poach a defensive back from Alabama sends a strong message about what they're building on that defense. I think Smith is going to be a very good player for the Irish next season. They are set at nickel. At 4th, I had kicker. They needed one. They got one in Noah Burnett. Former North Carolina kicker, very experienced. Everything that I just went over in the previous segment, they're good there. And number 5, I had defensive end, but I understand why they might not go out there and get one. So the point I made and why I thought they needed to get a defensive end was because I don't expect Boubacar Traore or Jordan Botelho to be ready to go at the start of the season. Once they're healthy and they're ready to contribute, they're obviously going to play a lot for Notre Dame, but I think they both suffered very serious knee injuries, and I don't know when we should expect to see them back at full health. Like, look at Mitchell Evans, right? He suffered a torn ACL in October of 2023 against Pittsburgh. He has not really looked like himself all season long, despite the fact that he has played pretty much every game this year. He just has not had quite the same burst. Now, some guys recover from ACL injuries differently, but that's something to consider. We shouldn't expect to see Boubacar Traore at 100% next season, and probably the same with Jordan Botelho as well, given the nature of their injuries. So I thought maybe they should go out there and get one. But I also understand that when you're trying to go get guys in the transfer portal, especially high-quality players, and you're like, hey, we want you to come to Notre Dame, but we also have these two guys who are going to play a lot when they're healthy, it's not the most attractive destination for that transfer. So I'm not surprised that they didn't get a defensive end in this cycle. And number 6, I had safety. I think that box is checked. Jaylen Strowman. I think he's going to compete to start next year. If he doesn't, that's probably a good thing, right? Because that means one of the players currently on Notre Dame's roster beat them out. It's like what happened this past fall with Adon Schuler and Rod Hurd. I thought Rod Hurd would start, just given his experience at Northwestern, but Adon Schuler beat him out, and he has had a fantastic season for Notre Dame this year. That's encouraging. That's what you want to see, right? You want to bring in these transfers to compete. You don't want to just hand them a job. You want them to compete with the guys on the roster. Number 7, I said they needed a tight end. They got one. Ty Washington from Arkansas doesn't have a ton of stats to show for it, but he's a really good blocker. And I think, for the concerns about Washington with the fact that he was dismissed from the team, I think that Notre Dame did their due diligence there, and they are not worried about him fitting in at Notre Dame. And now that Cooper Flanagan got hurt, the need for a tight end became honestly amplified because we don't know when Cooper Flanagan is going to be back. Marcus Freeman called it a left Achilles injury. That's not super encouraging, right? But maybe Cooper Flanagan's wasn't like a full torn Achilles or ruptured Achilles, whatever you want to call it. I don't have super high hopes there. I honestly would not be surprised if Notre Dame went out and got another tight end because Mitchell Evans is gone after this season. Eli Raridan has been prone to injury. Cooper Flanagan was a guy that they were super high on, but if he's not ready to go next year, they might need another one because they've got Jack Larson, the true freshman. He's still probably got some time and some development in the weight room that he needs to attend to. And then I like James Flanagan, the incoming freshman, but still that's a true freshman. They might honestly need one tight end, but it's a good thing that they got one, especially one who is as good of a blocker as Washington is. And number 8, I had backup quarterback. Now, if nobody transfers in that room and everyone comes back next year like Angeli, Minchie, Carr, and then Hebert, the true freshman, then they don't need a backup quarterback. But I'm just assuming one of those guys is going to leave because this is college football and quarterbacks transfer all the time. And then I had quarterback, linebacker, running back, and O-lineman not necessary. Notre Dame did not pick up any players at those positions. Devontae Smith is a nickel. He's not a true corner, and they don't need to. They are loaded at all of those positions going into next season. So they checked off a lot of the needs already. Defensive tackle, they're getting there. Wide receiver, they're done. Nickel, they're done. Kicker, they're done. Defensive end, we'll see. Safety, they're done. Tight end, they're probably done. They might not need a backup, and I don't think they need a corner, linebacker, running back, or O-lineman. So most of the work is already done. And you got to give some credit to this staff for getting not just the quantity of players and fill the needs that they had, but quality players like Malachi Fields is really good. Devontae Smith is really good. Strowman, Dawson, these are big-time players, and this Notre Dame coaching staff has proven that they have a really good eye at getting players in the transfer portal. I know some people are going to be like, well, RJ Open didn't really live up to the hype. Like, okay, yeah, but Javonte Jean-Baptiste far exceeded anyone's expectations. Riley Leonard has been great at quarterback despite the up and down year that he has had and the way that some fans look at him. Jordan Clark has been amazing on that defense. Rod Hurd didn't start, but he has been a contributor as well. Bo Collins has certainly had his moments as well, even though, Chris Mitchell wasn't a hit. Jane Harrison had a kickoff return for a touchdown against Georgia. So Notre Dame's transfers have all come up huge in different spots this year, and I feel like this class, when you look at it as a whole, they checked all the boxes that they really needed to for now. The spring portal window is going to open up again in April, and I expect Notre Dame to be aggressive again. They're going to try to get another defensive tackle, and they're probably going to have to fill some gaps that they didn't quite expect right now because even though no Notre Dame players have entered their name in the transfer portal yet, that's because they're part of this playoff run, obviously. But once the season ends, the players on the current roster have 5 days to enter their name in the transfer portal, and odds are we're going to see some guys leave. That's just the nature of college football. That's good attrition in the way that things work. So, overall, really strong class for Notre Dame in the transfer portal. I think things are really headed in the right direction. Even though Notre Dame is about to play in the national championship and they could potentially reach the mountaintop next week, this is a team that is built to last, and they were able to reload in the transfer portal. They're not going to rebuild next season. They are reloading, and things are really, really trending in the right direction for Marcus Freeman and his football program. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. Make sure you tune in tomorrow morning. My full preview of the national championship game against Ohio State. I can't wait for that one. Then we are going to continue covering that game for the next week with special guests and some other exciting stuff in the works as well. Plus, I am going to be doing another mailbag in the lead up. I haven't done one in a while, so if you've got questions about the big game, send them my way. You can submit yours in the YouTube comments or send them to me on X at Locked On Irish or in the Instagram DMs at Locked On Irish Pod. With so much content coming your way, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed the show today, remember, give this video a like if you're watching on YouTube or rate the show 5 stars and leave a review if you're listening to the podcast. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.